just stop to think about the sheer mind-boggling amount of life on our planet? I mean, scientists estimate there are somewhere around 8.7 million different species. Each one is a totally unique solution to the puzzle of survival. It's just an incredible amount of diversity. So the big question is, how on earth do we even start to make sense of it all?
Right? How do you organize something that vast? It's like being handed a library with millions and millions of books, but with no sections, no labels, no card catalog, nothing. It'd be chaos. You need a system. And in biology, that system is called classification. It's our attempt to solve this gigantic organizational puzzle. So for centuries, scientists have been working on this, let's call it a library of life. But the goal was never just to make some boring list. It was to understand the deep connections between all living things, to really map out how we're all related. And this is the really key idea. Biological classification isn't just about sorting things into neat little boxes. It's about building a massive family tree. It shows us who's related to whom by tracing those family lines back through millions of years. It's how we figured out, for instance, that a mushroom is actually more closely related to you and me than it is to a fern. Wild, right?
Okay, so how did this whole grand project get started? Well, as you can probably guess, the first attempts to organize life were, pretty straightforward. They were based on what people could just see with their own eyes. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle made one of the first real stabs at it. He looked at plants and said, okay, we've got trees, shrubs, and herbs. And for animals, he basically asked, does it have red blood or not? Super simple. Fast forward a couple of thousand years, and Carl Linnaeus makes it a bit more formal with his two-kingdom system, Plantae and Animalia. Basically, if it was green and didn't move, it was a plant. If it moved around and ate stuff, it was an animal. And, for a while, that system kind of worked. But the closer we looked, the more problems we found. Yeah, this simple system really started to fall apart. You had single-celled bacteria being thrown in the same group as giant sequoia trees. Fungi, which actually absorb food from other things, were stuck in the same box as plants that make their own food. But the biggest problem of all, it completely ignored the most fundamental difference in life. The one between simple prokaryotic cells, the ones with no nucleus, and complex eukaryotic cells, which do have one. The filing system was bursting at the seams. It needed a serious upgrade.
So, for about 200 years, scientists kind of struggled with these issues. They knew the system was flawed, but they weren't sure how to fix it. Then, in 1969, an ecologist named R.H. Whitaker came along and proposed a totally revolutionary new system that changed everything. Whitaker's five-kingdom system was just elegant. It was beautiful because it directly tackled all the flaws of the old two-kingdom setup. He proposed splitting all life into 5 major groups: Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. This wasn't just adding more boxes. It was a complete rethinking of the tree of life based on much deeper, more fundamental criteria. And this table really shows you the genius behind his logic. He used a few really smart criteria to reorganize everything. First, check out cell type. He made a massive, clean split between the simple prokaryotes, which he put in their own kingdom, Monera, and all the other more complex eukaryotes. And then, look at mode of nutrition. This is how he solved that fungi problem once and for all. He correctly saw that fungi are heterotrophs. They get their food from others, which is totally different from plants, the autotrophs that make their own. This table is basically the blueprint for the modern library of life.
All right, so let's do it. Let's take a quick tour through these 5 kingdoms and see what makes each one so fascinatingly unique.
First up, Kingdom Monera. This is the kingdom of bacteria. As the only prokaryotes, they are the simplest, the most ancient, and by far the most abundant life forms on our planet. They are literally everywhere, from the soil under your feet to inside boiling hot springs. And they come in all sorts of shapes, from little spheres to rods. Now, one really important group inside Monera is the cyanobacteria, like this nostoc here. These guys are absolute game changers. Not only do they pump out oxygen through photosynthesis, but some, like nostoc, have these incredible specialized cells called heterocysts. These cells can pull nitrogen right out of the thin air and fix it into a form that other living things can use. That process is essential for, pretty much all life on Earth.
Okay, next up is Kingdom Protista. The best way to think about this kingdom as the miscellaneous drawer of the eukaryotes. It's this hugely diverse grab bag of organisms, mostly single-celled things like amoebas and algae, that just don't quite fit in anywhere else. They're kind of the misfits, but they are a super important evolutionary link. They're the stepping stones to the other big, complex kingdoms.
And now for the fungi. This kingdom is home to everything from mushrooms and yeasts to the mold on your bread. And they are heterotrophs, but they don't eat their food. They absorb it from dead organic stuff. This makes them nature's great decomposers, the essential recycling crew. Another really cool thing that sets them apart from plants is that their cell walls are made of a tough material called chitin, not cellulose.
And their life cycles can get pretty involved. When they reproduce sexually, it's a three-step process. You get the fusion of their cells, then the fusion of the nuclei inside those cells, and finally, a special kind of cell division called meiosis that creates brand new spores, which can then go off and grow into new fungi. And finally, we get to the two kingdoms we know the best. You've got Kingdom Plantae. These are the complex, multicellular, photosynthesizing powerhouses that form the foundation of most ecosystems on land. And then there's Kingdom Animalia. That's us. We're the complex, multicellular organisms that get our energy by eating other things, and, a key feature, we can typically move around.
So, the five-kingdom system is fantastic for organizing cellular life. It really is. But what about the things that kind of break the rules? The weird outliers that blur the very definition of what it means to be alive. The things that aren't even made of cells. And that brings us to the absolutely bizarre world of viruses. As you can tell, just by looking at them, these aren't cells. Not at all. They're just little snippets of genetic material, either DNA or RNA, wrapped up in a protein coat. They are the ultimate parasites. Outside of a living cell, they're completely inert, like a speck of dust. But once they get inside, they hijack the cell's machinery and force it to make millions of copies of themselves.
So because they're not made of cells, and because they can't reproduce on their own, viruses aren't considered truly alive. They don't fit into any of the five kingdoms. They just exist in this strange, gray area between chemistry and biology. And believe it or not, it gets even weirder. You've got things called viroids, which are just a naked piece of infectious RNA. No protein coat, nothing else. And then you have prions, which might be the strangest of all. They are infectious proteins. They have no genetic material at all. No DNA, no RNA. They're just misfolded proteins that cause a catastrophic chain reaction, forcing other normal proteins to misfold too. And to round out our tour of life's strange outliers, we have lichens. Now, a lichen isn't one single organism. It's actually a permanent partnership, a symbiosis between a fungus and an alga. The alga makes food through photosynthesis, and the fungus provides the house and protection. They live so closely together, they basically function as one single entity. And, as the slide notes, they are incredibly sensitive to air quality, which makes them really good indicators of pollution. All of this brings us to a really important final thought. Whitaker's Five Kingdoms gave us an amazing, powerful framework for understanding the living world. But as we've just seen, life is constantly surprising us. From infectious proteins to creatures in the deepest parts of the ocean, we just keep finding exceptions that challenge our rules. And that's a powerful reminder that our library of life isn't some dusty old book that's already finished. It's a living document, and we are still writing it. Which makes you wonder, what other chapters are still out there, just waiting to be discovered?